The Galactic Council had stood for 3,000 years as the voice of peace among the stars. And in all that time, no species had dared to challenge its authority or question its wisdom. But humanity was about to change. Everything Ambassador Lisa Morgan stood in the center of the Great Chamber on Nexus Prime, surrounded by representatives from 47 different species. And she could feel their eyes upon her like cold judgment. The Valori with their silver skin and ancient eyes. The Krethians with their scaled faces and sharp teeth. The Molari who floated in their water tanks. And dozens of others who had traveled the stars long before humans had learned to make fire. "The evidence is clear," Lisa said, her voice steady despite the weight pressing against her chest. "The Krethian Empire is building a weapon capable of destroying entire star systems. And they intend to use it against humanity." High Arbiter Zelkoth, leader of the Council and eldest of the Valori, raised one slender hand. His face showed no emotion as he spoke in his soft, measured tone. "Ambassador Morgan, these claims are serious, but the intelligence you have provided cannot be verified through our standard channels. Without proper verification, this council cannot act on speculation alone." Lisa felt her hands tighten into fists at her sides. She had spent 6 months gathering this intelligence, had lost good agents in the process. And now they dismissed it as speculation, High Arbiter. "With respect, if we wait for your verification process, millions of human lives could be lost." Councilor Draxus of the Krethian Empire rose from his seat, his yellow eyes gleaming with something that looked almost like amusement. "The human ambassador speaks of threats and weapons, yet provides no solid proof. Perhaps this is simply the paranoia of a young species that has not yet learned its place among the elder races." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber, and Lisa felt her stomach turn. 40 years since humanity had joined the council, and still they were treated like children who had wandered into a room full of adults. The vote came quickly, and the result was not surprising. 31 against, 16 in favor, with several abstentions. Humanity's concerns were officially dismissed after the session ended. High Arbiter Zelkoth approached Lisa in the corridor outside the chamber. His ancient eyes held something that might have been sympathy, or perhaps pity. "Ambassador Morgan, I understand your frustration, but you must understand how these things work. Humanity is still new to galactic politics, and pushing too hard on this matter will only isolate your species further. And if the Krethians attack while we wait for proper political channels..." Lisa Skedulkoth paused for a long moment before answering. "Then the council will respond appropriately. That is all I can promise." Lisa wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that 3,000 years of peace meant something. But as she watched him walk away, she felt a cold certainty settling in her bones that something terrible was coming 12,000 light years away. On the colony world of New Eden, 12 million humans were living their ordinary lives. They worked in the farms that grew food for a dozen other colonies. They taught their children in schools built from local stone. They laughed and argued and fell in love under an alien sun that had become Home Captain Nathan Cole of the carrier USS Valiant was visiting his sister and her family when the sky began to burn. The first Krethian ships appeared without warning, dropping out of faster-than-light travel directly above the major population centers. There was no declaration of war, no demands, no communication of any kind. Just fire raining down from the heavens. Nathan grabbed his communicator and tried to reach the Valiant, but all he got was static. The Krethians were jamming everything. He watched in horror as beam weapons carved through the city like knives through flesh, and buildings that had stood for decades collapsed into dust and flame. "Nathan!" His sister screamed, clutching her 2 children close. The youngest was only 3 months old, still too young to understand why the world was ending around her. He tried to get them to the emergency shelters. tried to find some path through the chaos that consumed the streets. But the Krethian ground troops were already landing, and they showed no interest in taking prisoners. Admiral Daniel Harper received a distress signal aboard his flagship, the USS Dauntless, 3 hours after the attack began. By then, New Eden's orbital defenses had been reduced to debris, and the ground was covered with the dead and dying. "Sir, we have confirmation of at least 60 Krethian warships in orbit around New Eden," his tactical officer reported. "Colony defenses are gone, and civilian casualties are estimated in the hundreds of thousands and climbing." Hopper's jaw tightened as he processed the information. His fleet was only 4 hours away at maximum speed, close enough to make a difference. Close enough to save lives. Set course for New Eden. Maximum speed. "Sir," his communications officer interrupted, her voice shaking. "We have an incoming transmission from Nexus Prime. The Council is ordering all military vessels to stand down and hold position. They say military intervention would violate the Nexus Accords and could be considered an act of aggression." Hopper stared at the screen showing New Eden's location, knowing that every minute he waited meant more of his people dying. "They want us to stand down while the Krethians slaughter civilians?" "Those are the orders, sir." For a long moment, Admiral Harper considered ignoring those orders, considered being the man who started a war to save his people. But he had sworn oaths, had built his career on the belief that following the rules mattered, that civilization required sacrifice. "Hold position," he said. And the words tasted like ash in his mouth. 6 hours later, New Eden went silent. The Krethians had been thorough in their work, destroying not just the people, but the infrastructure, the farms, the schools, everything that humanity had built over 2 generations. 12 million souls erased from existence, including a 3-month-old baby who had never done anything wrong except be born human. The news reached Earth like a shockwave, and the grief that followed was unlike anything the planet had experienced since the darkest days of its history. Families learned that their loved ones were gone. Children discovered they were orphans. And an entire world began to understand that the galaxy was not the safe and welcoming place they had hoped it would be. In the Galactic Council chamber, Ambassador Lisa Morgan stood before the assembled representatives once more. Her face pale but her voice steady as stone. "New Eden is gone," she said. 12 million of my people are dead. And this council did nothing to stop it, nothing to save them, nothing at all. Counselor Draxus did not smile, but there was something in his yellow eyes that looked very much like satisfaction. And Lisa Morgan made a promise to herself in that moment. A promise written in the blood of 12 million innocent souls. Humanity would remember this day. And one day, the galaxy would understand exactly what that meant. The grief that swept across Earth was deep and terrible, touching every city and every home as the names of the dead scrolled across screens in every public square. 12 million names, 12 million stories that had ended in fire and silence. And the planet wept as it had not wept in centuries. President Kevin Brooks stood before the cameras in Geneva, his face drawn with exhaustion and something harder that burned behind his eyes. The whole world was watching, and he knew that the words he spoke now would echo through history. "Today, we mourn our brothers and sisters of New Eden," he began, his voice carrying the weight of unspeakable loss. They were farmers and teachers, scientists and artists, parents and children. They committed no crime, threatened no one, and yet they were murdered in cold blood by the Krethian Empire while the Galactic Council watched and did nothing. He paused, letting the silence stretch across the planet before continuing. "The Council has told us to be patient, to trust in their process, to believe that justice will come through proper channels. But proper channels did not save the 12 million souls who trusted us to protect them. Proper channels did not save the babies who died in their mother's arms." The president leaned forward, and his eyes seemed to burn through the camera directly into the heart of every human being watching. We trusted the council to keep the peace, and they failed us. We believed in their promises, and those promises turned to ash. So today, I make a different promise. A promise to the dead and to the living. A promise that will not be broken. His voice dropped to something cold and certain. There will be justice for New Eden. This I swear on the blood of our people, in the Galactic Council chamber. Ambassador Lisa Morgan requested an emergency session, and the representatives gathered with expressions ranging from concern to barely concealed contempt. They expected another plea for help, another desperate request that they could dismiss with sympathetic words and empty gestures. They were wrong. I stand before this council for the last time, Lisa said, her voice calm and clear as a winter morning. 40 years ago, humanity joined this body with hope in our hearts and trust in our souls. We believed that the galaxy would be better with us in it, and we believed that you would treat us as equals in time. She looked around the chamber at the faces that had judged her, dismissed her, and ultimately betrayed her. We were wrong. You never saw us as equals. You saw us as primitives, as children playing with dangerous toys, as a species to be managed and contained rather than welcomed and respected. And when the Creffians came to slaughter our people, you proved exactly how little our lives meant to you. High Arbiter Zelkoth raised his hand. Ambassador Morgan, the council understands your grief, but surely this is not the time for... I have not finished. Lisa interrupted, and something in her tone made the ancient Valori fall silent. You had the chance to stand with us, and you chose to stand aside. You had the power to save innocent lives, and you chose to protect your precious protocols instead. So now humanity will protect itself. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a single document, holding it up for all to see. Effective immediately, Earth withdraws from the Galactic Council. We renounce the Nexus Accords and all treaties that bind us to this body. From this moment forward, humanity speaks with one voice. And that voice says, never again. The chamber erupted in chaos. But Lisa Morgan simply turned and walked away, leaving her ambassadorial credentials on the floor behind her on Earth. The reaction was swift and unified. Political parties that had fought each other for generations now stood together. Old grudges were forgotten, and the entire planet began to move with a single purpose. General Amy Carter, head of Earth's combined military forces, met with President Brooks in a secure bunker beneath the Swiss Alps. With her was Dr. Eric Sanders, a thin man with tired eyes who had spent his entire career working on projects that most people did not know existed. Mr. President, General Carter began, spreading holographic displays across the table. For the past 15 years, we have been preparing for the possibility that the galaxy might not be as friendly as we hoped. What I am about to show you is classified beyond anything you have seen before. The displays flickered to life, showing schematics and test footage of weapons that should not have existed. Project Ragnarok, Dr. Sanders explained, adjusting his glasses as he spoke. A series of ship-mounted weapons capable of manipulating space-time itself. In simple terms, these weapons can tear holes in the fabric of reality, and anything caught in those holes ceases to exist. President Brooks stared at the displays with a mixture of awe and horror. How is this possible? The Council monitors all weapons development. General Carter allowed herself a small smile. The Council monitors what we let them see. Our real shipyards are hidden in the asteroid belts and behind the gas giants of our outer solar system. For the past decade, we have been building a fleet unlike anything the galaxy has ever seen. How many ships? 847 combat-ready vessels, with another 200 in final construction. More than any single species in the Council possesses, and armed with weapons they cannot imagine. The President was silent for a long moment, processing the enormity of what he was being told. Humanity had prepared for this day, had built in secret while pretending to be the harmless newcomers everyone believed them to be. And the Krethians? We have located their military command centers, their shipyards, their supply lines, and their homeworld, General Carter replied. We know where they sleep, where they eat, and where they build their weapons of mass murder. Admiral Daniel Harper was recalled to Earth and given command of Operation Thunderclap. The man who had been forced to watch New Eden die would now lead the response that would shake the galaxy to its foundations. The fleet began to move, emerging from hidden bases throughout the solar system. First 10 ships, then 50, then hundreds, pouring out of asteroids and from behind moons where they had waited in darkness and silence across the galaxy. Sensors began to light up with warnings as the impossible became real. The primitive humans, the species everyone had dismissed and underestimated, were revealing a military force that dwarfed the combined fleets of a dozen elder races on Nexus Prime. High Arbiter Zelkoth watched the sensor reports with growing horror. This cannot be correct, he whispered. They are primitives. They cannot have. But the numbers did not lie, and the fleet kept coming. Counselor Draxus of the Krethian Empire was no longer smiling. His yellow eyes were wide with something that looked very much like fear as he realized that his people had awakened something terrible. Something that would not rest until justice was served. 847 warships moved as one. Their courses set for Krethian space, their weapons armed and ready. And at the head of the fleet, Admiral Harper stood on the bridge of the USS Dauntless, looking at the stars that had once seemed so full of promise. Send a message to all ships, he ordered. Tell them that the ghosts of New Eden are watching. And today, we fight for them. The fleet jumped to faster than light speed and vanished into the darkness between stars, carrying with them the rage of a planet and the promise of a reckoning that would not be denied. The Krethian outpost at Vorlon Station was a fortress built to withstand any attack, surrounded by defense platforms and protected by 300 warships that had never known defeat in battle. The Krethian commanders who staffed it believed themselves untouchable, secure in the knowledge that no enemy would dare challenge their might. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Admiral Daniel Harper's fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. 847 ships appearing against the stars like angry ghosts rising from the void. The Krethian sensors screamed warnings, and commanders scrambled to their stations as alarms echoed through every corridor. Human vessels detected, the Krethian tactical officer reported, his scaled face twisting with confusion. Sir, the numbers cannot be correct. They show over 800 warships. The station commander stared at the display with growing disbelief. That is impossible. The humans have fewer than 200 ships in their entire fleet. Sir, I am showing what the sensors detect. 847 vessels, all armed and advancing on our position. On the bridge of the USS Dauntless, Admiral Harper watched the Krethian fleet scramble into defensive formation. They outnumbered his forward element 3-1, and their ships were larger and more heavily armored than anything humanity had revealed before this day. It would not matter. Captain Cole, Harper said through the fleet communication channel, take the Valiant and lead the first assault wave. Show them what Project Ragnarok can do. Captain Nathan Cole had lost his sister and her children on New Eden. He had watched them die while the galaxy did nothing, and that memory burned in his heart like a fire that would never go out. With pleasure, Admiral. The USS Valiant surged forward, flanked by 50 destroyers that moved with perfect coordination. The Krethian ships opened fire, their beam weapons painting the darkness with deadly light. But the human vessels were faster and more maneuverable than anything the Krethians had faced before. Activate Ragnarok weapons, Cole ordered Lieutenant Michelle Davis. His tactical officer pressed the firing sequence with steady hands. Ragnarok online. Weapons hot. Targeting Krethian command ship. The weapon that fired from the Valiant was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It was not a beam or a missile or an explosion, but something far more terrifying. A tear in the fabric of space itself, a wound in reality that consumed everything it touched. The Krethian command ship, a vessel twice the size of the Valiant, simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, bristling with weapons and filled with thousands of crew. The next moment it was gone, erased from the universe as if it had never been. Krethian fleet faltered as their commanders tried to process what they had witnessed. Their shields meant nothing against these weapons. Their armor was useless. Their numerical advantage had become meaningless. All ships, fire at will. Admiral Harper commanded the human fleet, unleashed its fury, and the battle became a slaughter. Krethian vessels exploded or vanished or were torn apart by forces they could not understand. And the darkness between the stars was lit with the fires of their destruction. Volan Station fell in 4 hours. Its mighty defenses crumbled, its garrison surrendered, and humanity claimed its first victory in a war that had only just begun across the galaxy. The Galactic Council watched the battle footage with expressions of pure horror. High Arbiter Zelkoth sat in stunned silence as he witnessed weapons that should not exist tearing through Krethian warships like they were made of paper. "How is this possible?" whispered the representative of the Molari. "The humans are primitives. They cannot have developed such technology." "It appears," Zelkoth replied slowly, "that we were very wrong about humanity. While the main fleet secured Vorlin Station, Captain Cole led a boarding team into the station's data center. They needed intelligence, needed to understand the full scope of Krethian military capability before pressing deeper into enemy territory. Lieutenant Michelle Davis worked quickly, her fingers flying across alien computer systems as she downloaded everything she could find. And then she found something that made her blood run cold. "Captain," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You need to see this." Cole moved to her station and looked at the documents she had uncovered. They were Council communications, classified at the highest level, and they told a story that was almost too terrible to believe. The attack on New Eden had not been a surprise. The Council had known it was coming. They had intercepted Krethian communications weeks before the assault, had understood exactly what was planned, and had chosen to let it happen. They knew. Cole breathed. They knew, and they did nothing. The documents revealed more. Certain council members had actively supported the attack, believing that humanity needed to be humbled before they grew too powerful. They had provided the Krethians with intelligence on New Eden's defenses, had ensured that no warning would reach the colony, had deliberately sacrificed 12 million innocent lives to protect their political interests. "We need to get this to Admiral Harper immediately," Davis said, before they could transmit the information. Alarms began to sound throughout the station. Krethian reinforcements had arrived, and they were not a small force. 2,000 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel, surrounding the human fleet with overwhelming numbers. This was the full might of the Krethian Empire, every ship they could gather, sent to crush the human uprising before it could spread. "Admiral," reported the tactical officer aboard the Dauntless. "Enemy fleet incoming. 2,000 vessels. They are forming a sphere around our position." The bridge fell silent as the crew processed the numbers. Even with their superior weapons, they were outnumbered more than 2 to 1 by an enemy that now understood the threat they faced. Admiral Harper looked at the tactical display, at the ring of red dots that surrounded his fleet like wolves circling their prey. Any reasonable commander would order a retreat, would recognize that discretion was the better part of valor, would live to fight another day. Daniel Harper was not feeling reasonable. "All ships, form attack pattern Delta." "We advance through their center." His executive officer turned to him with wide eyes. "Sir, they outnumber us significantly. A tactical withdrawal would let them regroup, reinforce, and prepare better defenses, Harper interrupted. No, we end this here and now. They think numbers will save them, but they have not yet understood what they are facing. He opened a channel to the entire fleet, his voice carrying to every ship and every crew member who waited for his command. This is Admiral Harper. I know what the numbers say, and I do not care. Those are the ships of the Empire that murdered our families on New Eden. The Empire that killed our children while the galaxy watched and did nothing. Today, we show them what happens when you make humanity angry. He paused, letting his words sink in. For New Eden. For the 12 million. No mercy, no retreat, no surrender. The human fleet began to move, advancing directly toward the heart of the Krethian formation. And as they approached, Admiral Harper transmitted a single message on an open channel, ensuring that every Krethian ship would hear his words. You killed our children, he said, his voice cold and hard as steel. Now face our rage. The two fleets collided in a storm of fire and light, and the stars themselves seemed to tremble at the fury of humanity unleashed. The Battle of Krithos Prime would be remembered as the largest space engagement in the history of the galaxy, a clash of forces so massive that it could be seen from worlds light years away. 2,000 Krethian warships against 800 human vessels. And the outcome would shape the future of every living species among the stars. The Krethian fleet moved with the confidence of superior numbers, their commanders believing that no amount of advanced weapons could overcome such overwhelming force. They had learned from Borland Station, had adapted their tactics, had spread their formations to minimize the damage from the terrifying space-time weapons. It was not enough. Admiral Harper did not fight like the commanders the Krethians had faced before. He did not form neat lines or follow predictable patterns. Instead, his fleet moved like a living thing, striking at weak points and retreating before counterattacks could form, appearing where the enemy least expected and vanishing before they could respond. They fight like madmen, the Krethian Supreme Commander reported to Warlord Zorvax. Their tactics make no sense. They take risks no rational species would consider. Zorvax watched the battle unfold with growing horror. Ship after ship was falling to the human assault, and his carefully planned formations were crumbling into chaos. Then we must fight without rationality as well. Order all ships to concentrate fire on their flagship. 300 Krethian vessels turned toward the USS Dauntless, pouring everything they had at Admiral Harper's command ship. The Dauntless shuddered under the assault, its shields flickering and its hull taking damage. But it did not fall. Captain Nathan Cole saw the danger and moved the Valiant into the path of the attack, drawing fire away from the flagship. Valiant to all destroyers, form protective screen around the Dauntless. We hold the line here. Lieutenant Michelle Davis fired the Ragnarok weapons again and again, each shot erasing another Krethian vessel from existence. But even she knew they could not maintain this forever. The weapons needed time to recharge, and the enemy was pressing hard on the surface of Krithos Prime, the Krethian homeworld. Commander Paul Turner led a strike team of 500 soldiers toward the planetary defense grid. If they could disable the ground-based weapons, the fleet could move in close and end the war in a single decisive blow. Enemy forces ahead, his sergeant reported. Looks like a full battalion between us and the target. Turner checked his weapon and signaled his team forward. They had trained for years in the harshest conditions Earth could offer, had pushed their bodies and minds beyond what most species believed possible. And they were ready for this moment. The battle on the ground was brutal and close, fought in the corridors and chambers of the Krethian defense complex. Turner's soldiers fell one by one, cut down by enemy fire as they pushed deeper into the facility. But they did not stop, did not hesitate, did not retreat. Turner himself took 3 wounds before reaching the main control room. and he was bleeding badly as he placed the charges that would disable the entire defense grid. "This is Turner to Fleet Command," he transmitted through gritted teeth. "Charges set. Detonation in 60 seconds. You might want to get your ships out of the way." The explosion lit up the night sky of Krithos Prime, and across the planet, the massive weapon platforms fell silent. The human fleet now had a clear path to the homeworld, but Warlord Zorvax had one final card to play. Attention. Human vessels. His voice crackled across all frequencies. "I have 30,000 prisoners from New Eden and other human colonies. If you do not withdraw immediately, I will begin executing them at a rate of 100 per minute on the bridge of the Dauntless." Admiral Harper felt his heart freeze. Survivors from New Eden, people they had believed lost, were alive and being held as shields against humanity's vengeance. "He is bluffing," his executive officer said. "There were no survivors from New Eden. There were escape ships," Harper replied quietly. "Some must have made it out before the end. And the Krethians captured them. The tactical situation had changed completely. They could destroy the Krethian fleet, could reduce their homeworld to ashes. But doing so would mean sacrificing 30,000 of their own people, Captain." Cole's voice came through the communication channel. "Admiral, I have an idea. Request permission to lead a rescue mission while the fleet keeps the Krethians occupied. The prisoners are being held in the capital city," Harper replied. "We do not have forces on the ground capable of reaching them. Commander Turner's team is still operational. I have been in contact with them. They have taken heavy casualties, but they can reach the prison facility if we provide a distraction." Harper looked at the tactical display, calculating odds and risks and the terrible weight of 30,000 lives. "Do it. Take whatever ships you need. We will keep the Krethians busy." The Valiant broke away from the main battle, accompanied by a dozen assault transports carrying every ground soldier who could still fight. They dropped toward the surface of Krithos Prime, while the rest of the fleet engaged the remaining Krethian vessels in a furious exchange of fire. Commander Turner, despite his wounds, refused to be evacuated. He led his surviving soldiers toward the prison complex, fighting through streets filled with Krethian defenders who seemed to appear from everywhere. "We are running out of time," his sergeant shouted over the sound of weapons fire. "Zorvax will start killing prisoners any minute. Then we move faster," Turner replied. And he pushed his battered body forward with nothing but willpower and the faces of the dead driving him on. The rescue team reached the prison facility just as the first executions were about to begin. Turner himself shot the Krethian officer, who was raising his weapon toward a line of human prisoners, and his soldiers swept through the complex like an unstoppable wave. "This is Turner to Fleet Command," he transmitted, his voice weak but triumphant. "Prisoners secured. Over 30,000 civilians recovered. Beginning evacuation now." In orbit, the Krethian fleet was collapsing. Their supreme commander was dead, their formations were shattered, and their morale had crumbled as they watched their homeworld's defenses fall. Ship after ship began to surrender, dropping their shields and powering down their weapons in the universal gesture of defeat. Warlord Zorvax was captured alive, dragged from his command bunker by human soldiers who showed him exactly the same mercy he had shown the people of New Eden, which was to say, enough mercy to keep him breathing for his trial. The Battle of Krithos Prime was over, and humanity had won, but Admiral Harper was not finished. The intelligence that Lieutenant Davis had uncovered at Vorland Station burned in his mind, the proof that the Council had known about New Eden and had done nothing. The war with the Krethians was ending, but there was another reckoning still to come. "Set course for Nexus Prime," he ordered. "We have business with the Galactic Council on Nexus Prime." High Arbiter Zelkoth watched the human fleet approaching with a mixture of awe and terror. 800 warships, battered but victorious, were heading directly for the seat of galactic power, They have defeated the Crethians, he said to the assembled council members. They have won their war. Surely they will return home now. But Councillor Draxus knew better. He had seen the intelligence files, knew what the humans must have discovered. And he understood that humanity was not coming to celebrate their victory. They were coming for judgment. We need to evacuate, Draxus said, his yellow eyes wide with fear. We need to flee before they arrive. And go where? Zelkoth asked quietly. There is nowhere in the galaxy they cannot find us. And I suspect running would only make things worse. The human fleet entered orbit around Nexus Prime, and the Council prepared to face the consequences of their betrayal. Not one of them could have predicted what humanity would do next, and that uncertainty was perhaps the most terrifying thing of all. The sky above Nexus Prime was filled with human warships, 800 vessels hanging in the darkness like silent judges waiting to deliver a verdict. The people of the station looked up at that terrible armada and wondered if these were the last moments of their civilization. High Arbiter Zelkoth stood at the great window of the council chamber, watching the lights of the human fleet and trying to imagine what death would feel like. He had lived for over 1,000 years, had guided the council through countless crises, and now it seemed that all of his work would end in fire and ruin. They are not firing, Councillor Draxus observed, his voice trembling with barely controlled fear. Why are they not firing? Perhaps they wish to see our faces when they destroy us, another councillor suggested, but Zelkoth shook his ancient head slowly. No, if they wanted us dead, we would already be dead. They want something else. They want us to understand. A communication request came through from the human flagship, and Zelkoth answered it with hands that did not shake despite the fear that gripped his heart. The face that appeared on the screen was not Admiral Harper, but President Kevin Brooks himself, the leader of Earth's united government. Behind him stood Ambassador Lisa Morgan and the Admiral, their expressions hard but controlled. High Arbiter Zelkoth, President Brooks said, I am coming to Nexus Prime to speak with the Council directly. I expect a proper welcome when I arrive. Zelkoth bowed his head. You will have it, President Brooks. The Council awaits your presence. The shuttle that descended from the USS Dauntless carried the most important humans in the galaxy. President Brooks, Ambassador Morgan, and Admiral Harper walked through the corridors of Nexus Prime, flanked by an honor guard of soldiers who had fought at Krethos Prime and survived. The council chamber was silent as they entered. 47 species watching the humans approach the central platform, where so many declarations had been made and so many fates had been decided. President Brooks looked around the room at the faces of those who had failed his people, who had allowed 12 million innocents to die rather than take a stand against aggression. He felt the weight of every soul lost on New Eden pressing against his shoulders, and he used that weight to keep his voice steady. 3 months ago, I stood before my people and promised justice for New Eden, he began. Today I am here to deliver on that promise, he gestured, and holographic displays appeared throughout the chamber, showing documents and communications that the council had tried to keep hidden. These are your own records, Brooks continued. They show that several members of this council knew about the Crethian attack on New Eden before it happened. They show that intelligence was shared with the Crethians to make the attack possible. They show that you sacrificed 12 million of my people because you were afraid of what humanity might become. Murmurs of shock and denial rippled through the chamber, but the evidence was undeniable. The documents bore official council seals and encryption codes that could not be forged. Councillor Draxus of the Crethian Empire was the architect of this conspiracy, Ambassador Morgan added, her voice cold. But he did not act alone. 7 other council members provided support and covered up the evidence. She named them one by one, and each name fell like a hammer blow. Representatives of species that had claimed friendship with humanity, Leaders who had smiled and offered hollow sympathies while knowing exactly what they had allowed to happen. These individuals will face trial for their crimes. President Brooks declared, "Human courts will judge them, and human justice will be served." This is not a request. High Arbiter Zelkoth stepped forward, his ancient face carved with shame and sorrow. "President Brooks, I must confess my own failing. I was not part of this conspiracy, but I knew something was wrong and I chose not to investigate. I chose comfort over truth, and 12 million innocent souls paid the price for my cowardice." He lowered himself to his knees before the human delegation, an act that no High Arbiter had ever performed in 3,000 years of Council history. "I have no defense, and I offer no excuse. I can only offer my resignation and my shame." Brooks looked down at the kneeling Valori, and something in his expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Your honesty is noted, High Arbiter. It does not erase your failure, but it suggests you might understand why what comes next is necessary." He turned to address the full council once more. "The Galactic Council has failed. Not just humanity, but every species that trusted it to keep the peace. For 3,000 years, you have maintained order through bureaucracy and compromise, and it worked well enough when everyone played by the rules. But when real evil appeared, when innocent lives were at stake, you chose politics over justice." His voice hardened. "That ends today." Ambassador Morgan produced a document and held it up for all to see. "This is a new galactic charter, written by humanity with input from the 16 species that voted to support us when no one else would. It establishes new rules for how the galaxy will be governed going forward." The charter was comprehensive. It required unanimous military response to unprovoked attacks on any member species, eliminated the possibility of political interference in defensive operations, and established humanity as permanent guardians of galactic peace with the authority to act when the Council could not. "You have a choice," President Brooks said. "Accept this charter and reform the Council under its terms, or we dissolve this body entirely and build something new without you." "And if we refuse both options?" a counselor asked nervously. Admiral Harper spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the weight of every battle he had fought. "Then we leave, and you are on your own. The next time someone attacks you, the next time a Krethian or something worse comes for your worlds and your families, you will face them alone. Humanity will not help those who betrayed us." The vote was swift and nearly unanimous. The new charter was accepted. The implicated council members were arrested, and the galaxy began its first steps toward a new order. Captain Nathan Cole was promoted to admiral and tasked with building a combined fleet of multiple species, a force that would never again stand idle while innocents were slaughtered. Lieutenant Michelle Davis received the highest honors Earth could bestow for her discovery of the Council's betrayal in the coordinates where New Eden had once orbited its sun. Construction began on a space station unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It was called Remembrance, and its lights would be visible from 100 light years away. A permanent memorial to the 12 million who had died and a warning to anyone who might consider such an atrocity again on the day of its completion. Ambassador Lisa Morgan returned to the council chamber to deliver a final message. The room was different now. The atmosphere changed by the presence of human guards and human influence. But the representatives still gathered to hear her speak. "We came to the stars hoping for friendship," Lisa said, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber and beyond. "We reached out with open hands and open hearts, believing that the galaxy would welcome us as we welcomed others. You taught us that peace must be defended, that justice must be fought for, that trust must be earned rather than given freely." She paused, looking around at the faces of those who had once dismissed humanity as primitive and dangerous. "We learned you a lesson well. We learned that we must be strong enough to protect those we love, wise enough to show mercy when we could destroy, and brave enough to build something better from the ashes of betrayal. Her gaze hardened, and every being in the chamber felt the weight of her words. We will never forget what happened at New Eden. We will never forget the faces of the 12 million who trusted us to keep them safe. And we will never forget that this council chose to let them die. She straightened, and in that moment she seemed to speak not just for herself but for all of humanity. But we also choose to move forward. We choose to believe that the galaxy can be better, that together we can build something worthy of the sacrifice our people made. This is not forgiveness, because some things cannot be forgiven. This is simply the choice to try, despite everything. To create a future worth living in, Lisa Morgan turned to leave the chamber. And as she walked toward the door, she spoke her final words over her shoulder. We will be watching. We will always be watching. And we will never again allow the innocent to suffer while the powerful do nothing. She stepped through the door and was gone, leaving behind a galaxy that would never be the same in the darkness between the stars. The lights of Remembrance Station burned bright, a testament to human grief and human strength, a promise kept to the dead, and a warning written in fire for all the ages to come. Humanity had shaken the stars with their rage, and the galaxy had learned the ultimate cost of betraying Earth's children. That cost was everything, and humanity would make sure it was never forgotten.